think at the end of the day is what medium or what platform requires you to tell a good story and reaches the most people.
Right, yeah, I think that a lot of this stuff, and we're really are just about to talk about it, also has a real life-improving quality and opportunity for giving people an experience that they might not be able to have if they are perhaps confined to a wheelchair or to a bed or whatever it is, or never going to be able to go on a safari in Africa and be able to, go to this and see what it's like and feel it and hear it and, maybe even smell it at that point. But that might be a real sort of a life-improving kind of opportunity as well. So it's not just journalistically, I think, although we'll talk about that specifically for the class, but does have some other interesting opportunities as well, I think.
Right. I think that it gets back to that New York Times story with the refugees. It's definitely a platform that allows you to build empathy for what's happening in the scene. If you can't experience that for a variety of reasons, then you as a communicator, storyteller, allow people to experience that, have that opportunity. So there are some cool examples. We read about the PTSD. There's lots of places doing some stuff with veterans in terms of dealing with PTSD. And it's one of those things, it's not like a treatment for everybody, it helps some people, and not all, but there's some cool stuff around that, and I think,
Yeah, even, as we start talking about some of this stuff, and I tested this out the other day, I can see where some people would find it a little odd. It was very strange to look completely behind me and see things back there, and it was sort of a game, I guess, but there were bullets flying at you in slow motion that would just sort of go right by your face, and a car that was, flipping end for end, and it looked like it was coming right at you. It takes a little getting used to it, does it not?
yes.
Yeah. I keep it more on the simplistic basis here. Some of these videos that you can watch, especially like on YouTube, you can, if you had like the 3D goggles on and look all around, I actually get a little dizzy sometimes with that on. But I can see it getting back to like the entertaining part, like when my niece played basketball, right? And I'm on the other side of the country watching the live stream. Well, they have the camera on the main person. Well, I want to watch my niece.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So even though the camera is there, if they had 360 video, I'd be just turn the camera a little bit and be watching her. So.
Right. I would think maybe even, let's take it from the coaching perspective. If you, after the game is over, and somebody had just videotaped this thing, would you like to be able to see what was happening from a lot of different angles as to how the defense was set up, or what your offensive player did or didn't do to try to get into that position? So I would think that could have a lot of opportunities. Not just for the viewer who wants to watch, a niece or a child or whatever it is to be able to play, but maybe from a coaching perspective or a teaching perspective as well.
For sure. And I think that's probably just a good point to make right there, is that any kind of setting that might benefit from like a first person view, it really lends itself to the platforms that are available, So if there's any benefit to put something on a guy's helmet and have the whole team or just the quarterback, or maybe that's a scout video or whatever it is, I think if you have a scenario where that makes sense to like take somebody and put them in a certain place, there's lots of different layers that I think open up some opportunities and doors. Right. So for sure. So.
Are they going to be able to make something that a football player could wear that not get destroyed out there? I know they put the audio, the wireless mics on them in some cases, and they seem to work okay. But I don't know about a camera. That'd be interesting.
GoPro at NAB, they actually announced a special department that is experimenting where it's a lot like this. Like you take the GoPro lens and they build custom housing for different things. So they did have the 2-camera front and back on a helmet, on the rear of a motorcycle fin, that kind of thing. So you'll see a ton of that. I think instead of just like mounting this on your head, you'll see a lot more
Right.
integrated. And I think eventually you'll see it with your phone too. I think there's lots of cool stuff that anything that you see 3D or 360, you can expect to like be put on these platforms just because it lends itself to that. So Google has some really crazy out there stuff that they're doing in terms of the software that uses for the self-driving car. If you ever look at that, it's doing kind of a live scan and constructing what the computer thinks the environment is. And if you just raise the quality and do that a little more real time, for a phone, you start to be able to capture your own environment really quickly.
Right.
And we're already starting to do that. Matt has a 3D scanner that hooks to an iPad, $500, that you can scan the room, creates a 3D model. You put it in these guys, and you can look around and be there. So, it's all. I call it the Zach Morris cell phone. Saved by the Bell, if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
You have the big cell phone that he's got. It's that, like we're dealing with the big block cell phone right now, and they're doing cool stuff already. So if you just kind of times that by 10,
Right.
I think that's what's the most interesting. Because even if you think back, 10 years ago, that's when iPhones came out. So what's going to happen to these 10 years is tough.
Right, yeah, 10 years from now, because one of the things we talked about, and let's start looking at some of these things, because some of these things are just, they're huge. And you just can't, is everybody going to be able to afford, a headset like that? And the only time, you don't want people walking down the street with those things on, do you? They're looking at their phones. That looks looks a little odd. It's one of the things that Matt talked about in the interview was the Google Glass.
Yeah.
And how one of the failures was that it was so ugly, or unattractive, or it was just weird to be wearing the thing. And these are even weirder yet if you put these on. Are they not?
Yeah, they're totally weird. I have an office with a window, so when I put this guy on, I'm kind of closed off. But if anybody looks at me, I'm just rolling my head around, looking like a weirdo.
Yeah, put that thing on. Show us. So people are all put it on. I don't care. It's
let me tell you what they are, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably better.
So it ranges. It's kind of like the cameras we talked about. There's range of price, but also quality. Everybody can go out and buy a Google Cardboard, which I'd highly recommend. Actually, they're like $15-$20. You just put your phone in there.
And this will work with either an iPhone or an Android, right?
Right. Yeah. And so
And then you put the little glass in.
Yep. And then you just have a headset that you put on and look around. So that's a real easy way to kind of experience both the 360 video, but also some other VR experiences that are on the phone that go beyond just video. When I say that, I mean some of the software we'll talk about is really marries into 3D animation, and that's where you hear a lot of gaming platform and all that kind of stuff. And we can talk a little bit about that when we get here. But you can experience that, so it's real easy. You already have a device. If you have or need a new phone, if you buy a new Samsung Galaxy, they're actually giving these, well, I don't know if they're still doing it, but at one point they were giving these away with the purchase of one of those. And it's the same kind of thing. You put your phone in there. Well, most of the time you don't see people click this on, but you can click it back on, and then it's the same kind of thing. You get the goggles there. It's a little bit better because you can control it just a bit, and then there's also a focus ring that allows you to kind of focus the lenses. The Cardboard is pretty straightforward, but what they do have is a one input button, so it allows you to click. So it's kind of like play and pause, or some of the games and apps that are out there just require you to look at something and click. And that's something that, I encourage everybody to try out, is just the simple interaction of moving a mouse and clicking, or swiping and tapping. How does that translate here? And what it means right now is I look at a certain area, it gives me a little dot, and I click, and that is like a selection. So just the interaction, I think, is kind of cool to think about. So obviously quality goes up, and then when you put these guys on, it's the same idea. It's got the built-in earphones and stuff. It's got
Yeah, and those are
bells.
nice because the sound really does help accentuate the experience.
For sure. And this is the first version of Oculus. We had a dev kit, which is a developer kit.
And when
that-
somebody says Oculus, is there a specific, how do you define that? Or is that just a brand name?
It's a brand name.
Okay,
So this is the Oculus Rift. The first version just came out in March. That's what this is. Before that, over the past year, we had the developer kit. So really all that means is it's still being developed, but we give you some tools to play around with and build some stuff. And really it's meant for software developers generally because they want to try to start to produce content. But I think there was enough buzz around the Oculus that a lot of people were getting them. So that's what we were doing, producing content, 360 video, trying some stuff out, getting our head around Unity and this sort of thing. So yeah, so it's cool to start actually seeing versions that were released to the public. The dev kit you had to order from Oculus, and there's a process. Now I think you can go to Best Buy and get one of these, and I'd encourage everybody just to go to Best Buy to try them out. They have demos that you set up, and just try them out and experience what it's like.
just curiously, what does this cost?
I want to say $500, but the catch is the computer that runs on. So if you just buy this for $500 and hook it up to a regular computer, it's probably not going to work. In fact, it won't work probably.
Okay,
And I don't say that to be kind of weird or to downplay or anything. It's just if you're a gamer, you'll have a good enough computer to run off of. Right now, they've went the route of cut all the low quality out and we're just going high quality, so the experience is the best possible.
right, okay.
And I think that's the way they're positioning it. The one thing, and the reason I have this one, there was a reason. I'll put it on so you see it. So
Yeah, there we go.
right,
Looks
This is what
space age.
this is what it looks like, and what happens when you see people doing it. So it's not something you'll see people walking around doing.
We hope.
We hope, but although I do help with the grant at a middle school, and we take this, and it's definitely a group project, even though one person has it on. So there's some walking around involved. It's kind of fun. But that does kind of lead to the idea is there are apps that allow you to walk around. Oculus is one, it's a brand.
But you can't see the room you're in.
Well, that's the cool thing about it, though. This is where you get to think of where do you want to take people, and we can do that kind of thing. It's kind of like laser tag if you think back to the old days. Instead of just an environment that you can see, shoot lasers.
Now, is this like the holodeck on Star Trek? Am I going to
Yeah,
date myself
yeah.
way back when, or is
Well,
that
and
still
No,
in
no.
the movies?
No, I think that's kind of the thing. Like you hear people talking about it, and if you just hear somebody talking about holographs and VR, it's kind of like, all right, they're just throwing out buzzwords and just too futuristic. But I think the idea that everybody should take away is that it's not that far off. I mean, you see the Tupac hologram, and you're like, wow, that's kind of novel and interesting. But they have laser tag kind of gaming things that are just warehouses that have regular blocks, and what they've done is they've mapped on an environment.
Oh, okay.
And then if you have a backpack with a computer in it, now all of a sudden you're walking around, and most of them are zombie games, but you're walking around in this environment.
So you would see the block in front of you that would be something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it would be a regular looking block, but you can put a texture on it, so you're kind of walking around
Okay.
an environment at that point. And most people will make the argument that, well, it looks like a video game. Yeah, but think about what you see in movies and high-end video games. The realism starts to get pretty crazy. And it doesn't take your mind a whole lot of time to figure out or think that you're really there, especially if it lends itself to that environment. The best ones right now are the ones where you're driving something or flying something, because you're in a seated position most of the time when you put this on.
Yeah.
So it feels like you're really there. If you're you have your controller and you're moving around an environment, it just feels like you're floating. So you lose the illusion a little bit.
Now you use this for, instead of moving your head, you're changing things around, or
yeah.
Kind of
So 360 video is just the fishbowl on the head kind of thing. And the director still, you know, you're switching different scenes or wherever, whatever you're doing. And really all you're doing is choosing what you're looking at. When you layer on kind of the gaming side of things, you allow, just like a regular game, you allow the user to kind of you know, move around the environment. And there's like kind of all the shades of gray in between. There's like complete first person kind of shooter look, you know, where you're moving around an environment looking at stuff. And then there's very stationary look. But I think that's an interesting kind of, I don't know, thread to follow, is that most people kind of chalk it up to gaming. Help that by saying gaming computers are really the ones that run this the best. But I do think it's just kind of like, this is what we needed to have the first version come out and be released. So I guess in turn, that's what you see a lot of, is games that you can play in this environment. But it makes complete sense, because if you know how games are made, they're made with 3D modeling, and anything that's 3D modeled in this environment, it's pretty trivial-ish to make it a VR game. You're just changing cameras at that point.
Right.
So it's not that it's easy, but it's in terms of where people are in terms of the skills, the video or the gaming community is way far ahead.
Yeah, it's not surprising that the gaming community sort of really came through with all of this. They were doing lots of 3D stuff, or at least simulated 3D stuff, for quite a while.
Right, and so you see that a lot, and then right behind that you see architecture. You mentioned like architecture or real estate. You already see that, and architecture, rightly so, is because they do a lot of 3D renders of the environments that they create or proposing. So again, it's relatively easy to port that over to a new platform. So instead of a movie player that, you know, renders a camera view just like in real life, you're changing that camera in the software to be 360, and then the user gets to pick whatever they want. And then on top of that, you give them control to walk around it and look at what they want. So it provides a layer of interactivity, I think, that is helpful in a lot of senses, and there's certain areas that it lends itself to because they're already doing some of the foundational things that are required to create things. So where you see kind of this heading for us in terms of communication is obviously like promoting that in those particular areas, but could we build environments that people could walk around in? Could we take people to certain areas? And if you think of anything that you see 3D, there's a potential there to pretty quickly make that something easy to put on these platforms.
Right.
And then a real great example is Google's Street View or Maps.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if it's 3D and you're already able to walk around it, it doesn't take much to pull over. And actually, if you have a cardboard, there's a Street View version for the cardboard, so you can kind of walk down certain areas and look around it. So lots of cool stuff.
Yes, indeed. Susan, let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you are doing. How would you describe that, or what would you call that?
Well, I've been interested in some of the modeling and the Unity software. So how I see this kind of happening, I guess, or maybe happening if I can get people interested in it, or maybe they're already interested in it, is, you know, like rapid development type modeling. And then what we do, like instead of like I'm watching the news or I'm watching a sports show, instead of I'm just watching the outside of a house, you know, something happened here, maybe we could have like a quick model of the house, and then, you know, just look around, and this could have happened over here and that could have happened there. And then also in using, I know you've seen a lot of the sports analysis type softwares where, you know, you can look at the angle that the guy is hitting the bat, or you can highlight, or you can time how long it's taken someone to get from here to there. I think for people that want to be led, you know, I don't want to have to, you know, put this on. I want you to tell me, I want you to show me, I want you to highlight this for me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that could have happened that way, or, you know, they could have done better if they went this way. So what we've done is we're trying to get like a model, maybe up like of the football field even, and you know, you can model a lot of different things, but you know, when you're doing like the sports analysis or something, you know, you in your Unity 3D software could go down a path that you think maybe the player could have gone to have gotten some better results or whatever. So,
Yeah, and you can flip that from being sort of the horizontal, watching it from side to side, to sort of turning it, and all of a sudden you're seeing what he or she would be seeing as they're going down the play this way, towards the end zone or towards the soccer goal or whatever it might be, which sort of makes it. Now, how difficult is that to do? If somebody in the class said, gee, I think that would be fascinating, is that how much knowledge do you have to be able to even just sort of to begin that process? I know you were showing us a little bit earlier that you had Matt and you were manipulating Matt doing some sort of fun things. But did you take a photograph of Matt and then drop it into software to do that? I mean, how does that process even begin?
yeah, well, I took a photo of Adam. He's kind enough to let me play around with this. And then, you know, just put him on like this generic body. And, you know, just then once I have him in like a model, like an FBX format, I can actually put him in Unity and have him doing a lot of things in the game too. But some of the things that he and I were talking about is that we could have like a lot of pre-made models, like so that this, you know, if the students wanted to say, okay, well, let's talk about, you know, the football field here. Boom, we drop that. We can let them drop that model of the football field and manipulate it and look at it up and down, or, you know, have different views of it going this way, whereas the students can talk about a lot of different what if type scenarios.
Right, and I always sort of like the times where they highlight somebody and say, look, here's the left tackle, you can see what they did here and see it from their perspective, which is kind of fun.
And we also feel that, you know, it doesn't have to be a model. This same software can be used with videos, you know. So if we could get, and we know a lot of the students.
Do they have to shoot it in 360?
They don't have to shoot it in 360. Okay. You can just pull it on down. But for somebody like me who's, you know, not real good in sports, I need somebody to draw the circles for me and draw the arrows for me, and, you know, and that happened right there, and there it is right there, and then I can say, oh yeah, it really is there.
Very cool. Let's talk very briefly about the ethical parts of all of this, because it seems like it does give the creators an opportunity to do some manipulation with information. I mean, communicators have always been able to try and manipulate the audience in some fashion, but this is yet another tool that we all need to be aware of.
Right. Well, I think just like any kind of platform, you as a communicator, developer, or photographer, videographer, you are deciding what other people are going to see. So, I mean, for sure with 360 video, you're going to decide where that thing's placed. You know, I guess theoretically they should be able to see everything, but again, it's timing, what people see, where they can see it. You choosing what to show and what not to show is still, I think, an extremely important thing to keep in mind. Just because you captured it doesn't mean it may or may not need to be shown. And I think that'll only get more complicated with you know, the live streaming. These things will start to stream live. Google's streamed their annual developers event in 360. This thing actually has a base that we can stream live 360. So you'll only see more of it, and I think the responsibility only becomes greater at that point.
Now, if we wanted to do that, could we do that and put it on our YouTube channel and do it live and let people come to it and see what it was like?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can try it.
We may try that. That might be kind of fun. I know you're going to be gone for a little while, but we'll see if we can do that, because again, it's another area. It's not, we don't need to talk about it much today, but I think Periscope and the ability to go live from almost anywhere anymore is also certainly an interesting tool, and certainly an interesting one from a journalistic perspective. But
right. Well, I think the thing that this stuff raises is if you are given the control to, I don't want to say teleport, but it's kind of like that, you know. You kind of do that with video, and you kind of do that with story and photos and that sort of stuff, but there's still like, you know, if this is my window to that, you know, there's still a sense that I'm not there. Whereas this, you're moving the needle closer to, I forgot I was in my office and I'm, you know, here. And that may seem kind of silly, especially if you haven't done this, but it doesn't take much to kind of trick your mind into like getting immersive. You know,
Right.
you think about like that suspension of disbelief, you know, when you're watching a movie, you kind of forget you're in the theater. If it's really captivating or something
Absolutely.
interesting.
And the perfect example for me was, and I went to this thing kicking and screaming because my wife wanted to see Jungle Book. And I went, oh, Jungle Book, I'm going to see a cartoon. I was mesmerized in the first 3 or 4 minutes. I believed those animals could talk. I believed everything there. And you forgot you were in the studio. I think that's a great, or in the theater, it's a great example.
Yeah, so it only becomes, I think, magnified with this kind of stuff. And you know, some of it's poor quality, so you kind of lose it pretty quickly. But others, you know, you really kind of are there. We had a Star Wars app for the longest time that was the coolest thing ever, and it was like a disappointment to take it off and realize that I was at work, having to go do work things now and
Right.
not like experimenting work. So I think if you understand that, I guess, and that kind of sets up what I'm going to say next. If you understand that, if you're really taking somebody to an environment that's way more immersive than what it usually is or is now, that there is a larger layer of what you show and what you're putting on the shoulders of the viewer. You know, it's one thing to see, you know, violence or something graphic, you know, in a frame or even live streamed. It's another thing to kind of feel like you were there, you know. And I think there'll be some interesting things in terms of ethical discussions of what's actually being produced. Like with any technology, you can look to porn to kind of, you know, lead the way. And that's no different here, but also things like, well, the video games, I mean, you're shooting things and that sort of stuff. But if you feel like you've done that, like somehow realistically, then what does that do to kind of, you know, cognitively, you know, like
Right.
have you experienced that? Did you really do it?
Well, especially maybe at a younger age.
Right,
Uh,
that- for
children, how much of that do you want them to experience?
For sure. And I should have mentioned, like, there's some acronyms just with any tech. So VR is virtual reality, and that's what we've kind of been talking about. 360 video can be on multiple platforms, like we talked about. But then I think most people are hearing it more about the Pokemon Go stuff.
Mhm.
That's considered augmented reality or AR. And you also see headsets coming down the pipeline that are kind of that AR experience, not just on your phone. So Microsoft HoloLens is like the thing that at least is leading the way in that. I'm sure there'll be a lot more. It looks pretty weird to put on your head, but if that gets smaller, like the size of these glasses. And
Yeah, will we,
you know, one
will
lens.
we start to see them look like wraparound sunglasses with the little earbuds?
I think so. I mean, the Google Glass didn't have an ear, but it had like this special little speaker that kind of worked with your ear. So for sure, I mean, if you see the pieces, you can see direction. I mean, I'm not going to predict future stuff, but you can definitely see a trend or a direction where if the quality or if there's content that's, you know, something that's worth experiencing, I think people will gravitate towards it. It's like the iPads, right? When it came out, like the response was, well, I don't need a laptop or I don't need another device, but
All of a sudden, we realized we
Right.
did.
So I think not that that's going to be the argument made for it, but I think when content is produced that is enticing enough that people want these things and understand, like, this is where I can go to get that experience, they will. And you see that, and I was mentioning this to you, you see that with a lot of campaigns or even journalism stories. We talked about the honor flights to
Mhm.
Washington for vets of World War II that couldn't go to memorials and stuff, so they made this kind of virtual tour. And part of like the distribution model was to take these devices that most people don't have and put them on the heads of the veterans that could watch it, but then the story is that project. You have profiles of the actual vets, you have like the whole thing being part of the actual story that you see told. So you can watch the story about these people, or you can go to the app and actually experience for yourself, kind of thing. And so you see that, and New York Times is famous for that too as well. They released a bunch of VR stuff, and they sent a lot of their subscribers Google Cardboard that had New York Times on it, right? So it was
Sure.
branded. But to be able to get the devices in people's hands to kind of consume some of the content's where we're at right now. But, you know, again, if it gets to the point where people want to, or there's content that's being developed, I think that's where you'll see like a, you know, so gaming, it's pretty obvious.
Right.
Like, you know, if I'm a gamer, I would totally recommend doing this. I'm not necessarily a gamer. It's a whole lot of fun though, so I can see how you get into it.
Right, and we all have a limited, finite amount of time during the day in which to do certain things. So maybe it will have some impact on other forms of media as well.
For sure. I think, sorry, yours.
Oh, well, I
Sorry,
can
just like-
see it in other aspects too, like I can see it in investigations. Like, for example, I watch the show Sherlock Holmes, right? Well, when Sherlock's trying to figure out what happened at this crime, he tries to mimic the crime scene at his house, and then he'll look around. Well, in this world, you know, when there is really a crime scene, you can take your 360 video and you can, before you have to shut it all down and just have take it of the room or the area or whatever, and then you can actually then send it to other people to let them look around and see, and even in the medical field too, you know, that how you can get consults with other doctors
Sure.
and stuff, you know, they may look at your neck in this way when you're looking at it over here. So I see a lot of practical aspects to it too.
For sure. There's a lot of examples with other fields. I mean, we're not the only ones experimenting
Sure.
with, you know, these kind of platforms. But I think the most, so I was kind of back to the content that people want. Right now, we just know the content that, you know, is available, you know, video, gaming. But you start to see some other cool stuff with the integration of the two. One of the things that I thought was cool about the first version of this Oculus that came out is that there was an actual platform that you could switch between apps. Because the dev kit, you had to kind of take the headset off and start a new app. So if you kind of liken that to your phone, you always have to go back to the home screen.
Sure.
Right? But if you double tap, it shows you some apps that you have open. You can switch easier. So now you don't have to keep taking that thing on and off. So you can actually switch. So there's kind of a home screen with all the apps that you have installed. So if you need that connection, it's a lot like your phone in that way. You download apps from an app store, you see them all there, you open it, takes you there, close it. And a lot of times you're seeing demos of like, could you have 3 apps open, kind of like a 3-monitor setup at your
Right.
desk, right? That kind of thing. And that's all in good, I think. But the thing that I think is the most unique about the Oculus, and it's not the only one out there. PlayStation has one that's kind of closed off to just the PS4, and HTC Vive is another platform. But what I find the most interesting about Oculus is who owns the Oculus. And if you don't know, it's Facebook. So,
Very nice. I
yeah.
didn't know that.
So in 2014, Facebook actually paid $2 billion for that. So in my mind, if you kind of liken it back to some history, I guess, if you pay attention to the web, you know, the web was interesting because you could post stuff and you could email stuff. But what really became cool about it was the 2.0 part, right? When you get social and you can actually interact with people, live video, all this kind of stuff. We see that over and over and over. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see what Facebook actually does with it in terms of a social platform, or how the social piece becomes more integrated, I guess. So that, I think, is what will attract a bigger audience in terms of getting more people to have the device, and smaller too.
Sure.
If it's weird like that, most people won't want
Right.
it.
Well, I'm sure it's like everything. It will get better with time.
Yeah. Zach Morris, block phone.
There we go.
Yeah, right. But I
Great
think that's
stuff.
cool. Yeah.
It'll be really interesting to see how things change, and I know you guys are working on some things along with Matt, so it will be fun to see how we sort of integrate all of this into not only our area here in journalism and advertising and public relations, but how it expands into other places as well.
Yeah, I think to just kind of get in there is to, as a student, don't think that this is like the one solution to everything. There's a habit of that in the past of when mobile came out, we need an app, and that was like somehow the silver bullet. It's very similar to that. Just because it exists doesn't mean you have to use it, but I think as a student, it's good to pay attention to these things, especially that you start to see more and more. As a young professional, if you can find ways to integrate or produce content for that, I think there's a little bit of showiness, novelty around it that can definitely help, in terms of your career.
Right,
So
absolutely.
at least paying attention to trends and finding people that are interested in it and seeing what might work for your story.
And that's what this class is all about.
There you go.
So, guys, thank you very much for this is very enlightening. I appreciate it. I hope all of you got some appreciation for that. And I'm sure that if you had any questions or concerns, Adam or Susan would be happy to answer them for you as well. So, again, thank you for being here, and thank you for watching.